or something. That'd be great.
And you can tell us if it was rubbish.
No,
I love it. Rubbish. Rubbish.
It's all rubbish.
Rubbish.
It's all rubbish. It's all rubbish.
One thing that absolutely
I think is detrimental to us as women or us as mothers or just generally, really, I don't think you have to be a woman, is when you're going through a season of disappointment or loss of something important to you, and you're trying to figure out how to have hope and strength, and then people give you pat answers or gloss over it or whatever. And so I was thinking, we've been through some stuff, all of us. I mean, we can't come out of life unscathed. And if someone was going to ask us, how do I get through this season of disappointment? How would I answer them without giving them a generic answer? How would I really answer them? Here's how you do it. What are your thoughts?
Being just able to not fix it, but be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Give that person space and time. Yeah. I think throughout my life, there been definitely big hills that I can pinpoint to where grief and loss and disappointment played a huge part. I think the first time I suffered disappointment and grief, and maybe not the first time, but one of the things I can think about is when I miscarried. And at that time, nobody in my life that I knew at that point had had a miscarriage. And also, we weren't really in a culture where we would talk about that very openly. So in my friend group, I was the first one. But then I sort of, because my personality is a little bit like I just spoke about it. And then I've come to find out that, somebody else had had one and they hadn't said anything. And then somebody else came out and said they had one. And I'm like, wow, it's incredible. That's something so personal and private, because obviously not many people know that depending on how long you were carrying the baby, you may not be showing. And I wasn't. I lost mine at 12 weeks, so I wasn't showing. But it was amazing to me for something that was so private and so personal, how many people were not talking about it.
Yeah.
So I think now being who I am today, just knowing the power of just being able to say out loud, this happened to me, or in the moment this is happening to me, so that your friends and your community can be hopefully somewhat a support to you in that moment. And, people, unless you've gone through things, you don't know what to say. But I think I've challenged my friends and my community to find your voice in this time when you do go through something that is a little confusing and you blame yourself, maybe, all those kind of things. And I know that that's what I, used to go through, what could I have done? What should I have done? So I think that was one of the major big moments in my life where I had to deal with the shock and the grief and the disappointment. Yeah. I mean, had to find my words and
talking about it, sharing.
sharing.
And so I think that's so important, because I think I tended to just shove it down and put on a happy face and try to be happy. I think I have learned that I am afraid of being a burden on other people. And it's so important to admit what you're really feeling and to not judge your own disappointment as, well, it's not as bad as that, or whatever. So to really admit what you're feeling and to put a voice to it and to find somebody that you can share that with, to share the burden with. Because it's really, really important to process that out. It helps you know what's important to you. And I know I had a situation where I broke my kneecap, and I'm a runner and really active. That was part of my identity, to be active. And when I broke my kneecap, I was 6 months not able to do anything. And I had 2 surgeries, and I just had no idea how much that it was so uncomfortable to ask other people for help. And it was, however, that was the thing that helped me get out of people pleasing, because I had to ask for help. And I had to work through how uncomfortable that was. And I had to work through the fact that I
was afraid of being a burden. And so I second you that just to feel the actual grief or disappointment and name it specifically, because disappointment is different than grief, is different than sadness, is different than, so like name it with a specific word if you can, because that will help you pinpoint what do you need.
I think too with that, the word lament is a buzzword right now. You know, a lot of people are talking about it, but I think the heart behind it is really, there's so much truth behind it. It's naming it, but it's also being incredibly truthful. And so I do some things to help people with soul care, like, you know, healing stuff. And one of the things that I'll say is you can't heal from what you won't admit. How can you get complete healing if you won't say, I'm angry?
Yeah.
I'm really, really angry.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. What are you angry about? You know, and how do you dig in? And okay, what's true and what's not true? And, you know, all of that. So we can dig in there. But if you're so busy being good, well, I'm just a little uncomfortable, you know? And so I actually had a situation this week where I was like, you're expressing a lot of anger. And the person was like, I'm not angry, I'm irritated. And I said, that's just another word for angry. You know, it's just like, admit the things so that you can deal with what's really happening. Because if you gloss over it, it's just so easy to put it over on a shelf, you know? And I think truth is such a big thing for me because of what we've walked through, losing our toddler son. I believed some of the stuff that people would say, like, you know, it's not that there's not truth somewhere in it. It's that people would say it to try to make themselves feel better and not engage in a deep conversation. So is there truth in that we grow through suffering? Absolutely. But when someone's suffering, you don't look at them and say, you're going to grow. It's going to be so good for you. And you're like, how can you tell me that holding my toddler in my arms is good for me? Like, what are you talking about? Now, 25 years later, I can say, man, so much fruit has come out of that. Would never choose it, and would, you know, gladly go back and have it different. But that suffering has increased my capacity. Can't experience that. We've all met people who've suffered, whether it be something like that or a crisis of identity, who couldn't get there. And then they're stuck and they're stuck in anger or they're stuck in resentment or whatever. I worked with a woman after that happened and she was like, oh, my son died 25 years ago in this ATV accident. And she was one of the most angry, bitter people. And it gave me so much grace actually for her because I was like, oh, now I understand. Like you just weren't able to go there. You know, and feel the feels. So I would say really feel the feels, but then also name them and admit it and keep digging. And then what? And then what? And then what? You know?
It's you're prompting me to want to say, when you're with somebody else who's in grief, you nailed it. Like you're like, well, what do I say? What do I do? Because I want to help. And one of the greatest things you can do is just let the other person say whatever they're going to say and let them feel. Just let them feel. Let them just be a safe space for them to feel really bad. So get really comfortable with silence and just, I'm here. I'm here.
So good.
Find a word or phrase that just means I'm here, and you're not trying to make them feel better. Because it's important to just feel the feeling.
Don't you think? I think it's not just a lack of like understanding grief or pain, but I do think it's, you know, we shot an episode before this on friendship. And I think anytime you're in a relationship with someone, there's like a level of authenticity that has to happen in order to go deep. And I think it's scary. And so I'm here I am, I'm your friend and you've broken your kneecap and you're having all these feelings and maybe a crisis of identity. And what I want to do is I don't actually want to feel all those things. I just want to tell you how it's going to be better
Yes.
so that we can then go get some lunch, or whatever. And it's like,
Yes.
you can't admit that. It's not like you're going to say it,
Right.
but it's actually what's happening internally at your core. And I think it is why it's so important. I mean, I would almost rather say, don't engage then. I would almost rather say,
Yes.
I'm
I
going to reach
agree.
out to my friend Jill and I'm going to say, Jill, I know that you're in pain and I just want you to know I'm thinking about
Yeah.
you. And then I'm going to leave it at
Yeah.
that if I can't engage.
That's right.
Because it's more harmful
Yeah.
to try to fix you
Yeah.
than it is just to say,
Yeah.
I love you.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think
agree.
so much we want. We actually, whether, yes, we may be uncomfortable in someone's pain, but we also, I think if we love our friends, we genuinely want them to feel better. And so then there are times when phrases may come out of our mouth just because we're trying to make it better.
Absolutely.
It's from a pure heart.
Sure.
It's trying
Sure.
to make it better.
I think recognizing that we can't, though, is really, really key. It's very free. It's very free.
Yeah.
Well, then how do you see? So we started the conversation with how do you have hope and strength?
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to give them.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that, I've suffered it and then I've done it to people.
Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you the hope in this situation. So I totally get it. So how do we personally do that for ourselves without lying to ourselves or covering it up? How do you give yourself authentic hope and authentic strength?
And how long is it okay to sit in whatever the muck is? Because I think I've struggled with that at times too. There's been some things that have happened over the course of our lives. And in the time, the world or my smartness in my brain would say, well, don't stay there. You can't stay there. But I think that we need to stay there some. But there's I don't know. I think it's a journey of how long we stay there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I can get on the side of depression if I allow myself to. Well, so going down a deep spiral depression hole is not good. But also acknowledging this really stinks, and this is terrible and this is crushing. So, allowing yourself to feel the feel, but then I don't know. It's hard to find out. For me, anyway, it's hard to find out sometimes how long can I sit there and feel the feels and watch myself spiral versus maybe feeling the feels and then figure out how to. I don't know. It's hard sometimes. You don't want to spiral.
Yeah.
Because I can
Yeah.
spiral into depression and then I'm in the bed.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm no good for me, no good for anybody. And it just keeps going downhill. So, but I also think that I have to acknowledge those feels. So it's interesting.
So you've had that experience before.
Yeah.
What helps you get out of the bed again?
Well, a decision. Bottom line is a decision. Like, I'm like, okay, I've cried all I can cry. You know what I mean? I can keep going downhill or I have to consciously, okay.
But see, even
not
the
to be
emotion that it's eliciting in you right now is speaking to, that's not easy to do. It's really not easy to do. We need tools and we need community. And that's the way out of those things. And so even when our community says the wrong thing or whatever, when we know that we're genuinely loved, and we can pick up the phone and say, I'm in bed. I can't get out of bed right now. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use my friend Jill here as an example. A few weeks ago, I was like, I'm in a place right now and I cannot get out of this place. And I need my therapist who's not available right now. And I need a tool. And my friend Jill, I know, has access to some tools. And so I left her 3 very long voice messages like, here's what's happening. Here's where I go. Give me a tool. And so I just want to encourage that to say, it's a decision, but then it's also it's that community piece and a
reach
way.
out for tools.
Yeah.
And I think even if you need to, if you do get stuck and you can't get yourself out of a deep, dark place, I had to go to therapy when I had the crisis of my identity and I was 6 months on a couch. It led me to therapy, which opened up a world of growth for me that I had no idea. I had no idea the way that I needed to grow. And that was the beginning of my growth.
Yeah.
But another thing, the tool, I just want to say the tool, a tool is to consider that grief, like there's a part of you that's feeling like, we say that all the time. Part of me feels this way and part of me feels that way. Like you're saying it right now. Part of me feels like I want to feel the feel, and part of me recognizes or feels like I might get stuck. So it's like, can you have an authentic part, an authentic self that connects with God, and can that part allow you, can the self allow you to, okay, this part, you're feeling really sad. What do you want me to know? What does that part want to say to me? And then this part doesn't want to get stuck. Okay, what does that part want to say to me? And can yourself hold these parts and kind of have a conversation? And if you can't, find a friend or a therapist or a counselor that can be the person to hold those parts. But I have found for myself to think of it as parts. It doesn't overwhelm me. If I think, okay, there is a important part of me that's really sad. I need to hear from that part. And there's an important part of me that wants to move, and have movement.
I think we have to understand that when you say parts, I'm thinking about people on the other end of this listening who have strong opinions about, oh, are you disassociating? And are you, and that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is I'm having a feeling.
Yes.
This part is a feeling.
Yeah.
The feeling is I'm really sad.
Yeah.
And I'm having a feeling.
Yeah.
Got to get out of here.
Yeah.
I got to move. I got to pull myself up by my bootstraps, or whatever that looks like. Where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Why? What do I need to acknowledge and know about, this? Is it that the little girl in me always just had to take care of myself? And so if I don't do this, or whatever it is, or not acknowledging the sadness or whatever over here, I'm afraid to acknowledge that I'm sad because sad might look like this or that.
Yeah.
And so again, coming back to that, I've been, walking through this season that's been just so incredibly hard and really trying to help others understand that you can hold them.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
You can be really sad.
Yeah.
And you can have a lot of joy at the same time.
Yeah.
And you can have gratitude and you can be pissed off.
Yeah.
And this is not okay. This was not fair.
Yeah.
It's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. Validation is key. As a family, we went through a very traumatic experience 4 years ago. And it affected each one of us very deeply, very differently. But each one of us, there's 4 of us in our family. And not knowing, we haven't walked this path before, not knowing what to do, how to look at this. And these were adult kids, 19, 17, old enough to know. And I think one of the most powerful things that we did as a family that we kind of just automatically just did was allowing each person to be very real, but allowing each person every day to give them the permission to say whatever they needed to say, however it looked, no pretty sentences, etc., etc. Because we're all different. We all process grief and pain differently. So being able to just say every day, wake up that day and be like, okay, we have freedom today to express however we want to keep ourselves today. There are no rules. And then what was so fun is that naturally there'd be like a day where it would be all around my husband, and it would just be beautiful. So we just nurtured and comforted and just gave my husband's face. And then the next day it would be somebody else. Next day it would be me, or the next day one of my other kids. And it was just so fun how it happened that way. And then one day my husband had to leave the house for a few minutes and a few hours. And we just, my kids and I, we just screamed at the top of our voices, every word and whatever we really mean, because again, we're different. We all express funny. I think just in the midst of pain, in the midst of betrayal, in the midst of grief, in the midst of sadness, just being able to give permission, your permission to articulate whatever you want to do. And if it is being quiet, then your permission to be quiet. But just checking in, because we don't know. You don't know how you're going to handle things. You don't know what it's going to look like. But I think just validating over and over again that it's okay if you need to be quiet today. It's okay if you need to be angry today. It's okay if you need to be sad today. It's okay if you want to go and watch reality TV and check out or play video games, whenever. But just But I think doing it together. And so I think, like you said, that knowing, how do you know if something's too long or too, but I think we do know on our knowers. And I think if we go down our knowers, we know. And I think for me, that season was 3 months of intense grief, intense sadness. And then one day I woke up and I just knew I have to be real. I had to be real to who I was. And I just woke up differently that day. And I was like, okay, not that it was all perfect and rainbows and anything. I knew I just felt a little stronger. So again, so we're talking about hope. I think it's being really present in the moment is how you're feeling, validate it, because we know enough. We know the news. We know the right things to think. We do know a lot of information. But I think going deep in our knowers and just knowing that there will be a day where we'll be able to breathe. You'll be able to breathe again without feeling all the pain. You will be able to shower without tasting the salt in your cheeks because of your cheeks are just embedded with tears. There will be a day. But if that looks like a year, if that looks like 6 months, if that looks a month, it's okay. And I think in the community, hopefully you're walking on the people that love you enough to be able to keep saying, I got you. I got you. Go with me.
I've heard of another tool on that point. If you're a person that, has kids and job and you can't like stop for 3 months. I've heard of it like give yourself a time. Okay, every day, from 7 to 7:30, that is my time to feel the grief. And then you kind of have to, okay, I got to be done with that because I have to go on with life. But tomorrow at 7 to 7:30, that's my time to feel. And then that can be a helpful tool.
That's a really great tool. I think too, asking like, when do you know, like how long, and knowing in your knower, for me, like what we've been walking through in this last year, I've had a little bit of fear around gravitating towards things just to make me feel better, that just like to make the pain stop and to escape. And so I've just been talking about it from day one of, look, I do not want mine to become a crutch, And so I got a therapist, and was like, I'm going to need tools for this. And I talked to her and I was like, I am not willing to give it up right now because I appreciate coming home. I don't want anyone to come at me, like I appreciate coming home. There's a quiet peace in my house. I'm going to have a glass of wine. I'm going to like transition from this part of my day to this part of my day. And she was like, okay, but you don't want it to become something that you're dependent on or excessive or whatever. And I was like, correct. And she goes, okay, then what you're going to do, and she just gives me this tool, you're going to go into your prayer closet with your glass of wine and you're going to like read a book or journal or whatever, and she was like, pick 3 things that you can do while you're doing it so that you're not associating it only with this thing. And I guess I'm mentioning it to say, I think you do know when you're knower, like this is good for me, but also could become unhealthy. And that scares us. That's the scary part is I could stay in bed forever. I could drink a whole bottle of wine or I could, whatever. And so back to tools and back to, I think, but just being transparent and I just say it. Yeah. Say it, kind of sometimes makes people a little uncomfortable, Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. I think one other thing, because the question is like, how do you have hope and strength? I want to tell people that I think when something happens, the way that in our culture we speak about it is like, you have to heal. Like there's this destination and it's over here and you're over here and you're like, there's no way I'm going to get there. And not only that, but if it's been something incredibly devastating, does that mean that I don't think this is important anymore? Like this loss is important. And so, but it's not really like that. It really is like your capacity stretches and it grows so that you can hold. So to your point, you get in the shower and it's not all tears. Well, it might take you weeks to get there, but now your capacity has stretched and you're like, oh my gosh, I have the capacity now to go 30 minutes without tears. Oh, and now I have the capacity, I've gone a whole day without crying. I haven't left my person behind. I haven't, belittled what's happening. I haven't done any of that, but I've stretched and I've grown and I've, that part. That for me was real freedom because I remember being angry. Don't treat me like I'm broken. This devastating thing has happened and it's normal, It's normal.
Yeah. And I think to your point too, we're also very circular in all that we do. The seasons, a year. And I think to just give hope and just some insight, don't be surprised if literally the next year you hit that same thing. And so often in my life, it's just an opportunity to go deeper. I don't need to go deeper. And I'm like, what? I thought we did this. I thought
I liked it with that invitation.
like I haven't, I had thought about this for weeks or whatever, but it's such a beautiful, if you heed it, there's actually deep hope and deep healing that can actually come in it. But don't be surprised if it comes back here in the next year. But that, because we are circular beings, what I mean by that, everything is season. Season. So that's good. That's how we as humans
That's
do
really
it.
good.
So just giving hope to that. There's nothing wrong with you if you come back and, And I think as well, practically, as we were talking about how to be good friends, like be practical. If you know a friend that's gone through something really, really hard, put it on your calendar and put it a note so it comes up yearly. And so that you can be hopefully a good supportive friend to that person and just say, hey, how are you doing this week? So just to get hope and just tools and you.
And being a good friend means you're still going to reach out and do it, even if that person, because I do have a friend in my life that she, like a burden, she's not going to but I'm still going to be. The good friend in you pushes through and says, I know you're not going to ask me this.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it anyway.
So good. Push through to do that. Be there. Such a good conversation. Thank you. Thanks for your transparency.